I'm about to show you all the key and aggressive ideas in the Stafford Gambit. I think there's like five or so different ways to end the game in less than 10 moves with this line. Now, before we start playing, I'm also going to be showing you guys how I train the line on chessreps.com. And then after I finish training the line, I'm going to be showing you guys in your games. Remember to watch the full video, use it in your games, and watch your ratings go through the roof. I'm going to be using chess reps to learn the line first. So it goes e5. And when they attack our pawn, we're actually not going to play the regular move and defend the pawn. So we're going to be counter attacking on move two. So they attack our pawn, we attack back their pawn. And then when they take our pawn, we do not take back their pawn because it's a gambit. What we want is for them to be moving the same piece more than once in the opening while we're using our time to develop our pieces. So here we're going to play the move knight to f6. And then once they take, even though it's good to take towards the center of the board, that's not the correct move. So the correct move is to take away from the center of the board because it unleashes our queen and our bishop. And this is actually where there's so many traps in this line. Now, I want you guys to notice how pawn to d3 already blocks out this bishop. What are we going to be doing? We're going to be using the time to develop our pieces and have massive control over the center with pieces. So we hit them with bishop to c5. Now, bishop to g5 is very counterintuitive. They're like, okay, they developed their bishop. Let me just develop my bishop and pin his knight. My fellow viewers, I present to you the first trap of the Stafford Gambit, where when they develop their bishop to pin our knight to our queen, we play the move knight takes e4, sacrificing our queen. Because if they get greedy and they're like, okay, let's take a free queen, it's actually GG's. It's actually checkmate in two moves. We play the move bishop takes f2 check. The king now has to go to e2, and bishop g4 is a checkmate. But let's keep learning some other lines. So let's say e4, e5, knight f3. Remember, we attack back their pawn. They take our pawn. We use the time to develop our pieces. So they take, we go d takes, and then here they play e5. Now, whenever you see them play e5, our knight is under attack, and we know the idea. We would love to put a knight on the e4 square. But now they play d3, and they're like, let me chase out the knight. Let me move your knight out of my half of the board. We do not move the knight. What we do here is we target the f2 pawn. So we're going to be using the time to develop our bishop, not moving the knight, and apply more pressure to f2. So we hit them with bishop to c5. And now, my fellow viewers, the second trap in the Starford Gambit, if they dare to touch our knight, I want you guys to notice how our queen is now attacking their queen. But not only that, the king is the only defender of the queen. So what are we going to do? We're going to be hitting them with a removing the guard tactic. Bishop takes f2 check. Now, I mean, king takes f2 is something. The king could also go to e2, but if the king goes to e2 in this position, there's bishop g4 and the queen is still hanging. So after king takes, we grab the queen and we just learned another line. Before I jump into the games, I want to learn one more line. So after e4, we play e5, knight f3, we attack back the pawn, knight takes e5, and remember, we want them to be moving the same piece more than once, so we develop our knight. Now, once they take, remember, don't take towards the center, take away from the center. And whenever they play this pawn d3 move, blocking out their bishop, we play the thematic bishop to c5. So after bishop to c5, we know that if they go bishop to g5 to pin, we sack our knight. We know that if they play, well, they could play e5, but if they play e5, the knight jumps in, and if d3, the bishop goes to c5. But let's go bishop to c5 here. Well, we already looked on this. Bishop g5, we takes, we sack. And I'm assuming king to e2 is what they're adding, but bishop to g4 is just winning. So let's do one more line. Let's do one more line. E4, C5, knight F3, knight F6, and then we play knight E6, takes, D3. Like the good thing about chess reps is the more you do this line, the more you train the line, it's like space repetition. It becomes a part of your nervous system. Like I automatically know what move to make. Bishop G5, we immediately sack on E4. Okay, in this line, the bishop decided not to take the queen, but even if they do not take the queen and try to protect the F2 pawn this way, unfortunately, it's still losing. Because what we're going to do is we're going to take on e3. And if they take this way, we take on f2 and they still lose the queen. But what if we take this way and they take with the pawn? it now exposes this diagonal pointing towards the king. So now we hit them with queen to h4, and then once the king move, queen to f2 is a checkmate. Let's hop into the games. Another Starford Gambit game. E4, we go e5. And once the knight attacks our pawn, we don't defend the pawn. We play knight to f6 and we counterattack the pawn on e4. Remember, we want to be very aggressive playing the Stafford Gambit. So knight takes e5, we play the move knight c6. We're trying to get the opponent to be moving the same pieces more than once. And then once they take on c6, we already got them in the Stafford Gambit. Because remember though, you need to take with the d pawn. Your bishop needs development and your queen needs to be active. And once you have your pieces covering the d4 square, pawn to d4 is not going to be possible. Now, keep in mind, we are already attacking the e4 pawn. So the opponent has to choose, am I going to play pawn to d3 and block out my bishop? Or am I going to play a natural move like knight c3, which will allow bishop c5? So he decided to play bishop to c4, like immediate bishop c4. Didn't try to guard the pawn. But there's actually a very cool trap that I want you guys to try in these types of position. Now, here's how it goes. Once the bishop comes to e4, I mean, first of all, that's just winning back our pawn, but we want more. We want to go for checkmate. So I'm going to play the move bishop c5 and immediately target the pawn on f2. Remember, target the f2 pawn, and there's going to be some very aggressive positions that you could play. For example, I'm already threatening to play knight g4, and if he allows knight g4 in this position, he's actually losing, which is why he plays the move queen to e2. Now, whenever you see a move like queen to e2, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to play the move knight to g4. Knight to g4. Now I'm applying pressure to this f2 pawn twice. Now, he is able to castle the king, but this is all a part of the plan. We want him to castle so that way his king is on the king side and it's easier for us to bring more pieces in the attack. So he castled the king, and here I want to try something very nice. I'm thinking about queen to h4, threatening a checkmate. Okay, here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be playing queen to h4, threatening the checkmate. We are also applying some pressure to his f2 pawn, but he definitely has enough defender on the f2 pawn. So we threaten the mate, allow pawn to h3, and now we're going to play the move pawn to h5. And this is very thematic. I want you guys to keep this in mind. This is super similar to the fishing pole trap. If he dares to take our knight, there's not going to be any way for him to prevent a checkmate. So let's just assume that he's not able to take the knight, which he did not take the knight, and he played a natural developing move, thinking, okay, bro, I'm not going to take your knight. I'm not going to fall for your fishing pole trap. What are you going to do now? He's right where we want him. If I could get my queen to h2, that would be a checkmate. So how do we get our queen to h2? We just play queen to g3. It's crazy. The pawn on f2 is not able to take on g3 because our bishop is pinning the f2 pawn to the queen. Now, what move can he possibly play to not get checkmate? Pawn takes, right? But the thing is, he's still not able to take my queen. Once I take with the h pawn, my rook joins the attack. This is Stafford Gambit 101. He's gonna be getting checkmated on the next at least two moves. He's gonna be getting checkmated. And keep in mind, we're 10 moves into the Stafford Gambit. So I'm already threatening check. Well, he plays Queen E3. He's trying to give me a queen. But why take a queen when that's just a checkmate? All right, some Stafford Gambit action. E4, E5. That's what we trained. And after they attack the pawn, don't guard the pawn. Use your knight and counterattack their pawn. And they're like, okay, he's just blundering his pawn. And now we develop the knight to c6. And once they trade the knights, they're now in the Starford Gambit. So let's take, and I want to see how my 930 opponent is going to respond to this. Currently, I'm attacking his pawn, and he develops his knight to guard the pawn. Not bad. But what we've learned about this is our bishop goes to c5, applying pressure to this weak f2 pawn. So how does he react to this? Especially since there's no pawn to d4, because I have two pieces covering the d4 square. So he decides to play bishop to c4. And my fellow viewers, I present to you another trap in the Stafford Gambit. First of all, there's so many traps here. The first one is I could sack my bishop, king takes, queen d4, king has to move, then take the bishop. But I want more. I'm going to play the move knight to g4. I'm now targeting his f2 pawn twice. That's all I'm doing. I'm targeting his f2 pawn twice. He castles the king. My fellow viewers, remember what we spoke about when it comes to attacking the opponent's king, right? When it comes to attacking the opponent's king, we attack the pawns around the opponent's king. I'm presenting to you queen to h4, another thematic move in the Starford Gambit, because we not only threaten a checkmate on h2, we also have three pieces attacking this pawn on f2. It's actually game over. We're seven moves in the Stafford Gambit, and it's game over. And I think I only learned like four lines so far. I'm going to be learning all the lines in the Stafford Gambit on chess reps. So he plays h3. He's attacking my knight. Now, whenever they do this, I'm going to show you guys like just the maddest way to finish off the game. He's gonna get checkmated in like three moves from this position. Like it's crazy. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna start by playing the move bishop takes f2 check. And I have three pieces on the square. He has two pieces on the square. So a regular human being is not gonna give up their rook. I mean, if he wants to give up his rook, that's on him. But the best move is to actually give up the rook. Because once I take and he moves the king to h1, if I could get my queen to h2, that would be a checkmate. So I'm going to play the move queen to g3, threatening a checkmate on h2. But what if the pawn takes my knight? Then it opens the h-file. So I pull my queen back to h5, and that's going to be a checkmate. Let's hit him with bishop takes f2, checking the opponent's king. The king now has to move, or he sacked the rook. But if the king moves, queen g3 is a forced checkmate. If he sacked the rook, I'm not sure which piece I'm going to take with, to be honest. I'm probably going to take with the queen, but moving the king, I kind of want him to move it with the king so that way I can show you guys the mate. But if he sacks the rook, hopefully you guys are able to see what the idea is. Okay, he sacked the rook because he was going to get checkmated. So he saw that, which means we're now just completely winning at this point because all we're going to be doing now is take the rook. The question is, how do we take the rook? We could take with the queen and say check, force the king to go to h1, pull the queen back to h4 with the threat of knight f2. We could check king move, pull the queen back to d4, or my fellow viewers, we could take this is another idea in the Starford Gambit. Once the king moves to h1, Once the king moves to h1, what we want to do is we don't necessarily want to move the knight. Please keep in mind what I'm saying is this is church. We're going to play the move pawn to h5. Once we put our pawn on h5, our knight stays on g4 the entire game. Now, I'm sure you guys are able to just see that taking the knight is actually just a checkmate. Like if he takes the knight, he's going to be getting checkmated. So now my knight stays on g4, which means my queen stays in the attack. Now my idea is to play queen to g3. Because if I play queen to g3, if he still takes, it's going to lead to a mate. And otherwise, we're going to be playing queen to h2, and that's going to be mate. So I'm assuming he's going to play something like queen to f3 and try to trade the queens off the board, which if he trades the queens off the board, then we're ahead by 2 points. So we should be happy trading the queens off the board. And being ahead by 2 points, there's also ways to win even more material. So for example, after we take the queen, so that's what he did. Now, the first thing I'm seeing is what if I check on e1? If I check on e1, he has two pieces to block the check. So he's likely going to be blocking the check with the queen. And once he blocks the check with the queen, I check on f2, he moves the king. I don't really have much. So we are forced to trade the queens off the board. But once we trade the queen off the board, keep in mind, we're already ahead by 2 points. We play the move knight to e5, hit the bishop, hit the pawn, and now we're attacking h3. Three of his pieces are under attack. So not only are we ahead by 2 points, we're about to win another point. It's GG's from here. So he decided to guard the pawn. Let's take this pawn. We're now ahead by 3 points. I would love to castle my king on the next move, but pawn to d4 has to be the most logical move here to attack my knight, forcing my knight to move. So let's move the knight to g6. And from here, we're just going to be pushing our pass pawns up the board, castle our king, trade a few pieces, and win the game. So I really hope that you guys like exactly what the Stafford Gambit has to bring. So bishop to e3, we get our king out the center of the board. Pawn to e5, decent. I guess he wants to play f4 and just start pushing his pawns up the board. The good thing is I'm ahead by material. I'm going to play the move knight e7 with the idea of playing knight to f5, hit the bishop, and then once I'm able to hit the bishop and this pawn at the same time, I'm winning even more material. So knight e4 didn't really help. Knight f5 hits the bishop. So he's now forced to move the actual bishop. And then once he moves the bishop, we take the pawn on d4. So now we're going to be ahead by 4 points, and we're going to be targeting f3 and c2. So I want you guys to try this in your game. I want you guys to learn all the lines on chessreps.com, link in the description. And let me know if the openings are working. So bishop to f4 was played. Let's go knight takes, hit the bishop, hit the pawn, hit this pawn. We're about to win more material, and we're ahead by 4 points. Okay, knight to g5 is interesting because he's basically saying, first of all, I'm attacking your unprotected bishop and I'm threatening a fork, but I'm ahead by 4 points. So he's just leaving his bishop hanging. So if I take his bishop, he takes my bishop, I take another bishop, he takes my knight, and I'm basically simplifying the position. If I take his bishop and he takes, thinking he's forking, I take another bishop and I'm winning. So let's just grab the bishop. This is just GG's. Remember, once winning, you just want to trade pieces to simplify the game. He took with the knight, and now our rook is on the second rank, attacking this pawn. Once you could get your rook on the second rank, it's over. If you could get two rooks on the second rank, then it's a winning advantage or checkmating attack. He's playing very passively, guarding the pawn. Let's be very aggressive, chasing his knight away. Okay, so he moves the knight here. And I'm gonna trick him actually. Actually, let's just go g4. Let's just create a pass pawn and push the pass pawn up the board. And he's actually not able to take due to this. So he attacks this pawn. And now we're just gonna take on f3. If he takes on f7, then my rook gets some files pointing towards his king, which is why he took and attacked my rook. Now I play rook to f2, gaining the tempo on his knight, keeping his rook guarding this pawn, and then I'm going to be able to play rook g8 and rook to g2. Once I'm able to double up on the second rank, then it's going to be game. So he moves the knight. Let's go rook to g1. The plan is to double up on the second rank. He's also not able to take, so he played the move rook to g1, which means he's leaving this unprotected. But then if I take here, he takes here. But everything is losing, to be honest. Let me just push my pass pawn up the board. Rook to f5 also concludes the game, because once I play rook f5, he has to move the knight. I trade the rook, I take the pawn, and he's going to resign. Okay, so this is what I was saying. He pulls the knight back. We simply take, and it doesn't really matter what he takes with. We just take all his pawns and we win the game. What the opponent resigns. Let's play more Stafford Gambit. Another Stafford Gambit. Now, our opponent is 1563, so she knows how to play some chess. Let's play e5 here. No, he attacks the pawn. We don't guard the pawn. We go knight to f6, counter attack their pawn. And then once he take our pawn, we develop the knight and hit the knight. And the moment he take my knight, he's right in the Stafford Gambit where we want him. So let's see if these lines that we learned on chessrefs.com works against 1563 players as well. He took the knight. Let's take with the d pawn. That's what we learned. Open up the bishop, allow the queen to get active, and we're already attacking this pawn. But just pay attention to this f2 pawn. We're trying to play moves like bishop to c5 and attack f2, which is why he plays d3. Now, after d3, we play the move bishop to c5, targeting the f2 pawn. Now, white has to be careful what he plays. He decided to play pawn to f3. Pawn to f3 has to be a weird response because not only will the king just not be able to get castled, he's also exposing this diagonal. But now I'm just going to develop. Let's finish our development. We have 3 or 4 pieces developed. All his pieces are still on the back rank. He made yet another pawn move. Now I'm thinking of queen d4 to threaten queen f2, but that will not lead to a mate. I mean, he has queen to e2 to prevent that move. But I also want to ensure that I castle my king. So I'm gonna play queen to d4 to threaten the mate, not necessarily playing hope chess. Hopefully he does not see the mate. The guy's 1563. He'll see the mate. But I want to be able to get my king castled as quickly as possible. So queen e2, I got my king out the center of the board. My development is already complete. He plays knight c3. He's starting to develop some of his pieces as well. Now I play the move rook to e8, putting my rook on the same line as the king and the queen. So I'm trying to open some lines. I'm trying to get rid of this e pawn. He plays bishop to c5, pinning my knight. I mean, bishop to b4 definitely applies some pressure there. I'm trying to find some good squares for my pieces. Let's just play pawn to h6, get rid of that bishop. If I'm able to get rid of his dark squared bishop, then he's going to have a lot of dark square weaknesses. And I'm actually going to take with the pawn, not the queen, because I want to play moves like f5. So he castles the king. Now I play f5. The rook is on the same line as the queen. So I'm trying to get rid of as much of these pawns as possible. Now he plays queen to d2. The queen is now on the same line as the king here, so I'm also thinking of getting a bishop here. But let's just keep taking. Let's just open the position. He took back. Now we play f5 again because we're trying to ensure that the position is as open as possible. And then he plays knight e2, which attacks my queen. He now has to be careful. I'm going to play queen to f2. Remember when we said the queen and the king is on the same diagonal? If he allows me to play bishop to e3, then that's game. There's a lot happening here because even if he tries to prevent this threat, my rook is also on the same line as the queen. So not only am I threatening to take with the pawn and this is not going to be able to take back, okay, he plays queen to f4. He's trying to trade the queens, but my fellow viewers, it's already losing. Because the queen and the king is on the same diagonal, we don't trade the queen. We hit him with the move bishop to e3. Check. Now, if he moves the king, we take the queen. But if he sack the queen, we still win the queen. This is called a fork, by the way. He moves the king, we grab the queen, and just like that, we won an entire queen, 17 moves in the Stafford Gambit. So from here, it's just a matter of trading pieces off the board. I mean, he plays h3, which is also losing. I'm going to hit him with queen to f3, forking both of the unprotected rooks. He has to find this move, bishop to h3. Very important move, not to immediately lose one of his rooks. But then I'm going to hit him with, okay, he did not find it. He decided to take my pawn, but we're not going to be taking this rook because once we take this rook, that's just a checkmate. We're about to do another Stafford Gambit game. e4, let's go e5. And remember, NF3, they hit the pawn. We don't guard the pawn. We go knight f6 and counterattack their pawn. And then the moment they get greedy and take on e5, they have entered the Stafford Gambit. Now we play knight to c6. If they want to pull their knight back, we just take back our pawn and we're fine. But once he takes on c6, we take with the d pawn. Remember, the d pawn, so that way your bishop gets development and your queen gets development. Knight c3, developing. Whenever you see moves like this, just go bishop to c5. Apply a lot of pressure to this f2 pawn. And let me know if you guys want one of those 500 to 2000, 2.5 hour long videos on the Stafford Gambit. I just don't assume that a lot of person plays it. My opponent plays g6, which is definitely interesting because he's actually already losing. Whenever you play this bishop to c5 move, your plan should be to play knight g4. Once I look on the position, the opponent really has no way to protect the f2 square. Now, I was expecting d4, but as we spoke about in the Stafford Gambit, that's why we take with the d pawn. We're now fully covering the d4 square. So let's just take on d4 here. Bishop to d2 was played. Now, how are we going to be winning this game? Do we want to fork or do we want to check so that way his king is extremely weak? Like, I'm not going to lie. I would love to check so that way he moves the king. But after that, I'm not really seeing what I have. So let's just go knight takes f2, fork on f2, hit the queen and the rook. He has to move the queen. And then once he moves the queen, I may not take the rook immediately because then the queen is just going to take. And yes, we're still winning, but we have time to develop more pieces. So let's develop more pieces. Let's go bishop to g4, developing our bishop with tempo on the queen. And once we take the rook, we're going to ensure that his king does not leave the center of the board. So we're already ahead by a pawn playing the Starford Gambit. On move 8, we're going to be winning the opponent's rook on the next move. And I'm just going to move my queen somewhere so that way I'm able to castle my king, and then the attack will begin. Queen to f4, which means he moves the queen, nothing guards the rook anymore. There's one thing I'm seeing though. If I take his rook, he takes my bishop. I check his king, doesn't really lead to much. I can take his rook and come back though, but I wanted to take that rook for free, to be honest. So is there a way I could not lose the bishop and still win the rook? That's my idea. Okay, I think I found it. It's pawn to g5. If I play pawn to g5, First of all, the queen does not have a lot of good squares to go. The queen has to take on g5. But once the queen takes on g5 and we trade queens, once I take his rook for free, there's nothing going to be able to take my bishop. So g5 is the move here. He now has to take, by the way. He has to take. So he took. Now I take on g4 so that way it pulls away his bishop. Then we grab the rook. And we're now ahead by 5 points. If you're ahead by 5 points, then your goal should be to start trading pieces off the board. I'm thinking of bishop to f2, but it doesn't really lead to much since he's going to move his king to d2. Bishop to g2 hits the knight, but I'm just going to pull the knight out and I'm fine. Once I get my king castled, not necessarily to get my king to safety, but sometimes castling helps you to get your rooks in the game. So my goal here is to castle my king so that way I'm able to get my rooks in the game and then the attack will be coming in. But then my opponent decided to just be a bit more kinder than usual and he plays rook to d1 and my bishop covers the square, which he did not see. I would still love to make bishop to f2 work because bishop to f2 he has to play king to d2, but it's not going to be leading to a checkmate. So here's what I'm going to do instead. Okay, there's nothing to do instead. I was about to play f6 to hit the bishop, but he's gonna take my bishop. So let's just take his rook, and now we're winning. I could have also captured his knight first with check, which I think would have been very, very strong. Because that way I would be trading pieces off the board, which is what I want, basically. But now all I need to do is get my rooks in the game. So I'm going to play this move pawn to f5. My whole idea is to open the position. Bishop to g2 here would be a very, very strong move. I'm not going to lie. It would have been so good to get rid of that knight, then take the rook. Because bishop to g2 here is going to trap my knight. The good thing is I'm ahead by 7 points. So if I lose this knight, I'm still going to be ahead by 4 points. C3 was played, attacking my bishop. We have to find somewhere safe for the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back to c5, just covering the f2 square. It doesn't really change too much. He attacks the bishop again. Let's just pull it back. And then I'm assuming he's going to play a5, really trying to annoy my bishop. But he really just needs to play bishop to g2, to be honest. So he took the pawn, which is what we wanted. Now I'm going to castle my king, which means my rook gets the f file, but my a rook also gets the e file. He plays g4 to guard the f pawn, and I'm thinking of playing rook here, but I'm also thinking of playing rook here. Either way, I'm not going to be losing my knight. So let's just give a check. Let's check the king. Let's force him to move. We're ahead by 7 points. So the goal from here is just to just get the pieces off the board. I mean, rook to e2, the bishop is pinned. From here, the goal is to get the pieces off the board. So what I want to do is apply pressure to the pin piece. I'm going to play the move rook to e4. The whole idea is to double up on the e file to win the bishop. Okay, knight f2 is also bad. This is a counting issue. I have two pieces on the square. He has none. So let's just take the free piece. My knight escape, rook to e1 is coming, and that's going to be GG's. And the opponent resigns.